"You're too stupid to even see what's coming," she said, smiling like she was telling me a private joke, then blinked big tears at the judge. The room swallowed it like a show. That's how it started. Theatrics, a practiced sob, the kind of performance you'd expect from someone who'd had enough practice online to know exactly where the camera sits. She told the judge she was penniless, that our marriage had left her without a dime, and that she couldn't possibly cover legal fees or childcare without emergency spousal support. The judge frowned, took notes, and all of Bellevue's sympathy was at her feet. But I had my doubts. I remember thinking, people don't sob in court for nothing. People don't suddenly become destitute overnight. Have you ever seen someone cry so precisely it felt rehearsed? Drop a comment if you've ever felt gaslit like that. We'd been married 9 years. There were mortgage payments on a 3-bedroom in North Seattle, a sleek Tesla that I paid for after my most recent promotion, and a prenup that made our divorce, on paper, straightforward. She'd signed the prenup like she signed everything, with a polite smile and the kind of eye contact that said she was already somewhere else. But when she filed, she shifted tactics. She claimed our bank accounts were drained, that I had hidden assets, that she was being left to rot. "By the way," she whispered to her lawyer before the first hearing, loud enough for me to hear, "by Christmas, I'll be sipping champagne in Tuscany with your money." I remember the way her lips curled. She had no idea how wrong she was about the timing. For 2 months after she filed, she cried poverty like it was a strategy. She told the court she couldn't afford top-tier representation, so she requested an order to cease temporary support and legal costs. She went on Instagram stories of single mom struggle and posted a grainy Polaroid of a cat to backdate sentimentality. Friends messaged me, "Dude, she's literally counting your money before the divorce is even filed." That was from Mark, my oldest friend, but I had no idea what I was about to discover. The first hint came from a Ring doorbell notification at 2:14 a.m., a grainy clip of her leaving the house at odd hours with a small backpack, hugging someone who wasn't me. It was one of those "you won't believe what I found next" moments. But then, that clip was only the beginning. You won't believe what I found next. 47 deleted messages, backed up by the cloud, each one saved by an automatic backup setting she forgot to turn off before wiping her phone. The messages were between her and a man named Cam, someone she never mentioned in conversation. And they weren't cuddly. They were transactional. "Dr. Alvarez can do the rhinoplasty this month. $68,000 up front, then the rest. Do you want the augmentation now or wait until summer? Don't worry about mom. I'll handle a hotel for us." Over 47 messages, the tone changed from excitement to an almost gleeful. Logistical planning. 47 deleted messages. 2 years of lies. $400,000 in transfers across multiple accounts. Those facts aren't just shocking. They're a roadmap. I remember the sick punch in the gut when the first bank PDF came through my inbox. An accidental CC in a work email that contained a redacted ledger. I'd been pestering a financial advisor about a mutual account. The advisor accidentally attached a copy of a bank statement where my wife was listed as authorized user on a joint rewards card. And there it was. A $125,000 transfer to Alvarez Aesthetics Bellevue. A $92,000 transfer labeled Surgery C. A lump sum wire, $183,000 to Dr. Alvarez Cosmetic. Add them up and it wasn't a mistake. It was $400,000. But then she had told the judge our savings were gone. That we had $600 in the joint account and an overdraft heaping like an accusation. I remembered counting coins in the couch to pay for dinner during one of the worst struggling nights she staged. We've all felt that betrayal, the small humiliations that add up to something massive. Anyone who's been through a divorce knows how lonely that isolation feels. What would you do if you found out your spouse spent nearly $500,000 on their lover's surgery while telling a judge they were broke? I asked my lawyer, Margaret Chen, that first night we sat in her tiny office above a Vietnamese noodle shop. Margaret had represented some of Seattle's nastiest divorces. She had the calm patience of someone who's seen both sides of human greed. "This is ambitious," she said, tapping her pen. "But we can work with documents." If she lied under oath about finances, especially with bank transfers like that, we can file for sanctions and motions to compel discovery. We need forensic accounting. We need subpoenas for those transfers. And we need to make her think she's in control, so she keeps digging holes she can't climb out of. "Isn't that risky?" I asked. "Isn't it easier to let it go?" "Few things are as satisfying," Margaret said, "as watching the person who played you like a fiddle realize the tune has stopped." I felt anger, humiliation, and the heavy responsibility of being the kind of protagonist Redditors cheer for. Flawed, impulsive, but smart enough to get an edge. I made mistakes. I printed things I shouldn't have. I let my temper flare in text messages. But inside the courtroom, I learned to breathe and let Margaret do the talking. During the first motion hearing, my ex looked at me like I was the one making a spectacle. "You're too stupid to even see what's coming," she sneered again to a friend in the pews. Little did she know, I'd already started moving the pieces. We started small. Step 1. Forensic recovery of deleted texts. The iCloud backup refused to hand over everything. But our tech guy Raj dug through iTunes backups and old devices. He recovered messages that proved Cam wasn't just a fling. He was listed in receipts as consultant Cam R. He'd stayed in Airbnbs for weeks at a time. There were 3 separate Venmo transfers labeled Cam Surgery Deposit. Step 2. Follow the money. Margaret filed subpoenas to the bank. It wasn't simple. She'd used a mix of personal credit cards, corporate accounts from a shell LLC she'd set up, and a cash payment chain that would have made a prosecutor smile. But banks have logs. Money leaves trails even when you try to sweep it under the rug. The bank records came back. $400,000 to cosmetic clinics, private consultations, recovery hotels, flights to LA, and a chain of luxury purchases timed to the same weeks she told the court she couldn't afford groceries. But what if she claims it was a loan? What if it's from an inheritance? Someone in the message thread asked. I thought about that. She'd been telling everyone we were facing bankruptcy. She'd worn shabby cardigans to hearings and cried about ruined credit. But the receipts included her signature, a membership card with her name, treatment plans signed by her with dates right before she filed for emergency relief. We had 3 moments where it looked like the plan would fail. Moment 1. The bank delayed compliance. They claimed privacy constraints and said it would take weeks. My stomach flipped. What if the judge granted her temporary support and she siphoned more funds? Moment 2. Her lawyer served us with a motion to seal records, arguing sensitive medical information and privacy rights. It looked like we'd block our own evidence before it saw the light. Margaret told me to be patient. She said, let her make that argument on the record. We'll make privacy work for us, not against us. Moment 3. Cam's social accounts went private. His Instagram cleared out photos and added a bio that said, businessman, discreet. He hired a lawyer, and a subpoena to connect Cam to the transfers returned as no records found. I remember thinking, this was getting out of hand. What happened next was the twist. While we were dealing with sealed file arguments and delayed bank compliance, my neighbor, an earnest retiree who walked her Labrador every morning, handed me a flyer. You might want this, she said. It was a business card for a person who did private ledger analysis for healthcare providers. Alvarez Recovery Services. The name struck a bell. We'd seen Alvarez on those transfers. I called, assuming it was a hit. The woman on the phone sounded surprised and told me to send the account numbers. She said they'd only work with attorneys, so of course, I forwarded everything to Margaret. Margaret called back 2 hours later. He made a mistake, she told me. Dr. Alvarez runs 3 clinics, Bellevue, Seattle, and LA. 2 of the wires were routed through a medical billing intermediary in Phoenix. The billing intermediary flagged the transfers as out-of-network cosmetic surgery, and they keep receipts for insurance reasons. They have invoices, dates, the surgical consent forms. They didn't intend to be part of a legal mess, but they're paperwork people. They don't like fraud on their ledgers. I will never forget how calm Margaret was when she said, "We have a smoking gun." At the next hearing, she stood up with a stack of invoices and a single printout. "Your Honor," she said, "we subpoenaed the billing records from Alvarez Aesthetics. They show $400,000 in charges to Miss K's patient account over 18 months. They show 3 consultations with CR, listed as companion/guest, and signed consent forms that include Miss K's signature. These are not loans. These are cosmetic procedures." My ex-wife's face when the clerk handed the judge the invoices, pricely printed, clinical, undeniable, was a study in panic. She had practiced sadness until it flowed like a second skin. But the ledger was sterile and merciless. Numbers do not cry. "Ms. K," the judge said, "these records contradict your sworn statements that you are without funds. Care to explain why you told the court you had no money when your billing records show otherwise?" She opened her mouth. She blinked. Then she did what she did best. Performance. I am mortified," she said, voice trembling. Those were medical expenses for reconstructive surgery after an accident. I did not mean to mislead the court." That was the pivot she attempted. Pretend the cosmetic procedures were medically necessary. Margaret had anticipated this. "Your Honor, the invoices include explicit notes for elective procedures. There's a deposit to rhinoplasty dated 3 weeks before Miss K filed for emergency support. There's a deposit labeled nipple reconstruction. That's an example I use. Sorry." She didn't actually say that. I slipped. But Margaret laid out the logic clearly. Elective, signed, paid in cash, or transfers that Miss K controlled. "You're too stupid to even see what's coming," my ex whispered from the pews. She looked at me like I was an object in a display. But then the judge did something I couldn't have predicted. He ordered the records unsealed and called for a forensic accounting review. He asked directly whether award of temporary support should be stayed and whether the court should sanction misrepresentation. Audience, what would you have done if your spouse suddenly accused you of hiding assets while simultaneously paying $400,000 to turn someone's face into a new asset? Tell me in the comments, would you have kept quiet or dragged every receipt into the light? We got the forensic accountant's report 2 weeks later. It was brutal and beautiful. The report traced funds across a spiderweb of LLCs, personal cards, and frankly, Venmo, that apologized for being clunky. It included screenshots of music festival photos where Cam and my ex were tagged together the same weekend as post-op selfies. It mapped 3 separate transfers from an account labeled K Enterprises LLC that I didn't know existed, and it showed the funds had passed through a shell company to avoid direct traceability. Margaret had discovered a canonical phrase in the ledgers, aesthetic consignment. What made it painful was the human detail. The recovery hotel receipt listed room service purchases, lobster, 3 bottles of champagne, on the nights the plausible poverty narrative needed to be convincing. There's a special kind of silence that fills a courtroom when someone's life implodes. I heard it twice that week. We hit the high witness. I testified. That was one of the few times I remember being breathless and precise at once. The opposing counsel tried to paint me as vindictive, a predictable move. "Can't you let the poor woman be?" he asked, leaning in like a silver-tongued siren of legal cliches. I looked at him and said, "She's spent $400,000 hiding an affair and landscaping it as tragedy. She stood in front of this court and sobbed for sympathy while buying a nose for her boyfriend. Is that a hardship? Or is that fraud?" My voice was steady. I had proof. I had 47 messages. I had the invoices. I had the ring footage of late-night departures. I had a list of Venmo transactions to Cam that matched the dates on the surgical consent forms. The opposing counsel's face tightened. My ex-wife's hands went cold. "You're too stupid to even see what's coming," she had said. But now the plot had reversed. The judge asked for sanctions and a fine. He ordered restitution equal to the amount of expenses that were proven non-marital. He denied her emergency request for support. He asked the prosecutor whether misrepresentation under oath warranted referral. It did. The moment the bill came due for my ex, she made a noise that was part gasp, part attempt at soprano, an operatic performance for a very different audience. She was ordered to repay a chunk of the $400,000 as marital waste, a legal term that basically says you spent marital assets recklessly or for reasons that undermine the marital estate. The judge ordered her to pay back a significant portion and to sign over a settlement that included the shell company's assets. He even ordered a temporary freeze on discretionary spending until restitution was arranged. What was her face when the bailiff read the order? It collapsed like a mask. "He'll never figure it out. He's completely clueless," she said to the friend she texted during the break. But she was wrong. I had figured it out, and Margaret had turned my hurt into a legal instrument that made it matter. Were we perfect? No. Did I act out of spite at times? Yes. I leaked small things to a friend who ran a neighborhood news blog. Nothing illegal, but enough to make her feel the social pressure. Was I wrong to have mental warfare tactics? Maybe. Tell me I'm not crazy for what I did next. On the day the final settlement was drafted, I declined to make any more petty public comments. I let the law do its work. Some people later told me they'd expected a cinematic revenge, an Instagram expose, a public confrontation on a pier. Instead, the courthouse did what social media could not. It enforced consequences. 6 months later, I saw her walking past a boutique in Bellevue, hands on a pegboard of scarves she used to buy for me as impromptu thoughtful gifts. She looked at the prices like she was calculating a complex sum, and at the same time, I felt a mixture of pity and satisfaction. The boyfriend, Cam, had disappeared from my mental topography. Someone told me he had moved to LA, changed his handle, and left a trail of invoices like breadcrumbs to a different life. He'd lost the comfortable anonymity of being a secret. He lost the ease of being the person whose new nose she posted like a trophy. As for me, the settlement wasn't a Hollywood payday. After attorney fees and the little penalties you'd expect, I wasn't wealthy, but I wasn't destitute. I got my house, I kept my career, and maybe most importantly, I stopped being the man she had practiced breaking. I met someone, Sarah, at the patent office where I did a talk. She laughed at my dry jokes and called me technically solvent, in a way that made me think that's the nicest thing anyone had said about money and grief. Here's a statistic that stuck with me. The average length of a legal separation case like ours is about 14 months. Ours took 18. 2 years of lies can cost you more than money. They cost you reputation, relationships, time. The $400,000 was a number that represented not just vanity surgery, but the entire architecture of a lie. People online asked whether this was vindictive. Some said I should have settled quietly, kept my dignity, moved on. Others said I'd done the right thing by letting the law punish calculated deception. What would you have done? Would you have pressed, subpoenaed, and exposed? Or would you have walked away? Drop your answer below. I've kept screenshots if you don't believe me. The court documents are public record. You can look them up if you live in Washington State and want to confirm a name or a docket number. Security footage doesn't lie. Transcripts give you a straight spine. I posted nothing vindictive. I let the ledger speak. What did I learn? First, vigilance matters. Second, theatrics are a poor defense against cold numbers. Third, revenge done through the system is messy, but it can be precise. Would I recommend it? Not always. It costs time, emotional energy, and the risk of being painted as obsessed. But when someone weaponizes empathy to profit off of your life, the scales deserve to tip back. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have exposed her? Let the court chew over the invoices and the 47 messages? Or let the social performance fade? Tell me in the comments. Some people think I went too far. Some say I did too little. Which side are you on? If you want more stories of justice served, the ones that smell less like drama and more like the slow, grinding sound of accountability, there are dozens more like this. Hit subscribe if you're curious, and if you want the receipts, they're in the docket.